Hello, I'm Wade McCoy, owner and operator of Results Martial Arts, and I just wanted to speak to you guys a little bit about choosing a martial arts training facility or MMA gym. Obviously, we're here in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is one of the meccas of MMA, and there's a lot of big super gyms to pick from out there. But one thing you have to realize and consider when looking at those gyms is they have a lot of benefits, but just like anything, normally there's another side to that too. Those super gyms, really, when they come in, they have so many students and so many people and so many high-level fighters. You got to realize if you're a new person who's just getting into MMA and you need to polish up technique, it might not be the best spot to start out with. You got to realize that those instructors and trainers, they're really going to be highlighting their cream of the crop MMA fighters, the guys who got fights next week, the guys who got contracts with the pro shows that are going to be fighting in Bellator, UFC. If you're going to be the amateur guy or the new local guy, they might not have as much time to give you attention and things like that. And even more if you're just in it to get in shape and for self-defense, and you just want to do it as a hobby, you're really probably going to be put in the back burner in a lot of those schools. Not all of them, but I've definitely seen it happen. I've trained at a lot of those schools. I've seen how many students filter out. They also, a lot of the big mega gyms filter out a lot of instructors. You'll see one instructor there for a month, and then he's at another super gym training. And so you can also consider going to the smaller school. Why is a smaller school? I do have pro and amateur MMA fighters, and because of that, because I have a smaller amount, they get a lot more of my time individually, and I get to clean up their technique. If they have questions, I have a lot more time to answer them. So it's just something that you would definitely want to consider when you're choosing an MMA gym. Another subject that I think is misunderstood or a lot of times brought as a point, but I don't think it's really valid, is that everybody says, oh, you had to be a former pro MMA fighter to be a good coach. And I think a fighter is something deep inside the person, but that doesn't mean that somebody can't have a love for the art and can't become a great coach. I think actually if you looked at a lot of the top MMA coaches out there today, most of the very high level ones actually had very few MMA fights, if any MMA fights. Some did come from a high level kickboxing background like Duke Rufus. Some I don't believe had like any fights like Greg Jackson. But obviously he has a love for MMA, he has a love for grappling, and those attributes can also turn into becoming a great coach. You don't have to be a former MMA champion. It's just like in basketball. You look at some of the great coaches in NBA, they weren't all-star NBA players, but they did have a love for basketball, and then they became great coaches. I think MMA is the same way. So look into somebody, and I'm not saying that Joe Blow can say, hey, I'm an MMA coach and know what he's doing, but if there is a coach out there and he loves the sport and you see him training and putting in time into it and learning the disciplines of wrestling, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, boxing, and he's studying those things, he can definitely be a great coach in my opinion. And a third step that I definitely think that you can consider nowadays in MMA is everybody says, oh, you have to come from an MMA gym, that traditional martial arts doesn't work. There's a lot of guys now who are starting to come from the traditional backgrounds. I think when MMA first hit the scene, the traditional guys definitely had a disadvantage. They weren't sparring correctly, they didn't have a ground game, they weren't in the physical shape they needed to be. But now you're starting to see a lot of the top strikers in the UFC started in a traditional background. The Anthony Pettis, the Lyoto Machidas, Anderson Silva's a 5th-degree black belt in Taekwondo. A lot of the top strikers nowadays came from a traditional martial arts school background, and I just think it helps build the coordination, the dexterity, and the flexibility, and the movement of striking for MMA actually really turns over really well into the MMA ring. I actually think the point sparring system, the guys like Stephen Thompson and some of those guys, you're going to continue to see do very well in MMA because of the footwork, because of the light gloves. As soon as somebody gets in and hits somebody with a hard combination, they're knocked out or they're knocked down. Versus people are used to fighting with the big gloves on, the boxing gloves and the kickboxing gloves. They can learn more how to cover up, stay in the pocket, and learn how to stay in and fight in the trenches. You don't see many guys fighting in the trenches in MMA with the light gloves on. There's just too much damage that can occur from them little gloves, and if they stay in the pocket, they're obviously also giving themselves up a chance to be taken down. So I think the footwork and explosiveness of traditional MMA striking, or traditional martial arts striking, is going to continue to be very effective in MMA today.